Okay, motion terminology. I need to distinguish between a couple of different ideas within motion, okay? Because right away, particularly if you've never done physics, right, you'll get very, very confused if you don't know exactly what we're talking about when we say, you know, this is equal to something or this quantity is changing in a particular way, okay? So the first ideas that I want to contrast are distance and displacement. Now, if you're, bless you, if you're not physics-minded, these things might be synonymous to you, okay? They're like how fast something moves. And true enough, that's the basic idea beneath them, okay? But the idea about distance is, how far have you traveled, okay? How far have you traveled? Okay? For instance, I'm walking back and forth in front of this whiteboard, right? So, I don't know, what is it, like 2.5 meters from here to there, okay? So as I walk back and forth, okay, I've moved 2.5 meters, and now I've moved 5, and now I've moved 7.5, okay? So that's a travel question, okay? But displacement is quite different. Displacement thinks about where did you start, and how far are you from that starting point? Okay, how far are you from your origin, if you like? Okay, so now that I'm back where I started from where I was talking about, right? My displacement is 0, if that sort of makes sense. Okay, my distance has been, I don't know, whatever, 4 lots of 10 meters. Okay, so that's how far I've actually gone. But in terms of displacement, I'm where I began. Okay, so my displacement would be 0. Now, along with that, these two ideas also go with a rate of change that has exactly the same difference. Okay? And you've sort of heard us talking about this and allude to it before. In terms of rates of change, we would say, how far have you traveled? Distance, how's that changing? We call that speed. Okay? Speed is distance over time. Okay? Now, when we think about displacement, which is about where you are relative to where you began, okay, we give it a different name. We call it velocity. Okay? So velocity is not distance over time, it is displacement over time. Okay, now, along with this, let me get another colour. Let me try and introduce some weird words for you. Maybe, again, the physics people will be like, oh yeah, this makes sense. These two, distance and speed, okay, we call them scalar numbers. Scalar. Okay. What that means is, it just represents a quantity, or a magnitude, or a size. And because it's a size, much like length is a scalar number. The smallest it can be is 0. Okay, it can be 0 or it can be positive. In terms of distance traveled, you can't travel negative meters, right? Because it's like, well, how far have I gone? I started at 0, and then it just started to go up from there, right? So therefore, scalar numbers, they're the smallest they can be is 0, okay? But they're usually positive. Now, velocity and displacement, on the other hand, okay, they are not scalar numbers. We call them vectors. Okay, that's a really weird, fancy, intimidating word. You might have heard them in connection to matrices. It's a whole first-year university topic, and it's very, very confusing. But all it means is there's not just a quantity or a size. There's a quantity, and there's a direction. Okay, so this is quantity plus direction. Okay, so for that reason, a vector can be negative, okay? Or a displacement could be negative, okay? For instance, if we said, okay, the middle of the whiteboard that I'm standing at, okay, I'm going to call that my origin, that's my starting point, okay? And over this way, I'm going to call that positive, because I'm thinking about a direction as well as where I've gone, okay? And that means negative, okay? So if this is the origin and I'm standing over here now, both my displacement and my velocity were negative. Okay, does that make sense? Because I'm to the, well, from my perspective, I'm to the left. Okay. Now when I come back, Okay, I've come back to the origin, so my displacement was 0. What happened to my velocity? Well, it was negative, and then it was positive. And they exactly cancelled themselves out, okay? And that's why my total displacement is 0, because the velocities sort of eliminate each other, if you like, okay? So the key to get here is that this can go negative. When we're talking about velocity, you can say minus 5 meters per second, okay? Whereas if I said speed, that would be meaningless, okay? We just want what's the quantity, what's the size, all right?